Welcome to the Capula podcast, The Ultimate Exchange. I'm your host, Alex Maxton, Senior OT Cybersecurity Consultant here at Capula. And I'm joined today by Ben White from OPSWAT, if you want to introduce yourself.
So, morning, Alex. Thank you very much for this. Yeah, I'm Ben White. I am the Director of Industrial Control Partnerships at OPSWAT. Quick background, prior to OPSWAT, I was at Fortinet, Emerson and Capula.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm also joined by another guest, also from OPSWAT, Steven Broadwell. If you want to introduce yourself.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Steve Broadwell. So I'm the lead SE for Northern Europe. Been with OPSWAT for quite a while now. Previous to that, I was Fortinet for a number of years. Before that, Symantec for a number of years. And it keeps going on and on and on until I used to started in vendorland in Novell, if anybody remembers Novell Netwear. So I was there for quite some time dealing with... I'm showing my age now, yeah. I'll get my hat. So happy to talk IT, OT, cyber. We can tangent any way you want.
Right, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In today's episode, we'll explore how data moves through OT environments and why securing it is so important, and what organizations can do to protect and secure their data in transit. So let's jump straight into it. What is data in transit?
Hello, first of all. I'm glad we're here on probably one of the hottest days in probably one of the hottest rooms, so that's often fun. And I'm not going to lie, I don't know about you, Ben, but I'm a little bit excited to see how this is going to pan out, really, because it's not scripted at all, as you're probably going to find out very quickly. So we kind of know where we might hopefully end up, but we don't know how we're going to get there, but I'm quite excited to find out. I'm sure you are too. What about you, Ben?
A bit like Steve, it's a very hot room, very hot day. Probably the worst one to be doing this on, but I'm interested to see where we go today.
Yeah, that's great. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about data in transit. So I just want to start maybe with you, Ben. What is data in transit to you?
I'm glad you started with me.
I'm glad he started with data in transit, because to be honest, most people, if I was going to put a bet on with you, it'd be OT and visibility. It's what nearly everyone starts on. And I'll apologise now if that's your second question and I've just now ruined your entire flow. And it's like, but yeah, data in transit. Go on, mate. I'll let you go first.
So data in transit to me, I mean, you can look at it in two areas. Data in transit within OT, so within the system, or data in transit as you're traversing a boundary, so you're going out into IT. So data in transit to me is anything that is being developed, created, or stored within OT and then being accessed. And obviously how that is being accessed and going through. And one thing I looked at the other day, which obviously comes quite well for us, data in transit is probably one of the, and jump in at any time, one of the first things you think about is something that is always connected. So data in transit as in like it is continuously being connected, like internet at home. There is always data going through your broadband line. In OT, data in transit is also laptops, files. It's not just about what's going through a wire. It's also how data is being transited.
I think that's quite key. I mean, I think we need to take a step back first, because you've just gone straight into why is data moving almost, but what data are we talking about? And so when I'm talking in OT, I normally think of it in two buckets. You've got, for instance, you've got the system files, you know, for your PLCs, your RTUs, your SCADAs, your engineering laptops, which are maybe crazy of me, but I think are more tangible, like your patches, your firmware, your upgrades, your updates, your backups, your config files. And then you've still got your streams, don't get me wrong. So you've got your real-time monitoring, your normal monitoring, your protocols, your IoT protocols, your OT protocols, and I'm talking really quick here. It's what I do. But then you've also got the second bucket, which is your productivity files, which is, for instance, your manuals, your PDFs, your Word documents, your Excel files, your audits, your log files, your reports, all of that great stuff, which is getting more and more important now. And the reason why we're getting more and more, and it's becoming more and more important, is the usual buzzwords: your digitization, your digital substations, your electrification of everything, your smart manufacturing, your industry 4.0, your IoT, OT conversions, your, keep going on. You've got your industrial OT, industrial IoT, your IoT devices. And as these are getting more and more of these devices, the more patches there are, the more firmware there is, there's more updates that needs to happen. But even when you start looking at the productivity files and all those files getting connectivity, the reason they're doing that is because, well, they want availability. You want better efficiency. You want better analytics, better decision making, and so forth and so forth. So it's becoming more and more important to get access to this data, even real-time data, now. And so the question is, as you were starting to allude to then, is now we know the need for this data, how is this data coming into IT and OT today? And I'll let you have
so just on that, you're saying there's loads of different bits of data. You've got your firmwares. And do you think it's becoming more? Are you seeing that this is happening more in the industry, as in people maybe weren't taking it seriously before? And sort of second to that, what are the reasons that you think people are? Is it just the fact that industry is growing? We may talk about it later about the future of where data is going. You said about like digitalization, Industry 4.0. We've been in that for a long time. But is that the reason why, or is it more about regulation that you think this sort of change of understanding their data is happening?
I think historically, data has been accessed by multiple different users for many different reasons. I think Steve's point, when you start to chuck in the buzzwords that are used across industry now, digitalization, digital transformation, it's because businesses are triggering a change, and that change is being triggered can be regulation, could also be through wanting to be more efficient, get more understanding around what devices are doing and how they can change those devices or maintain those devices in a more efficient way. So, I mean, going back a long way, some of the original areas that I used to work on, getting data out of systems, was very simply, you could look at getting SNMP data out of a switch to be able to create a visual representation on a SCADA platform. It's like, that was me having to get data out of a system, but containing it within OT layer. Whereas if you look at it now, somebody's trying to get all the data out of drives to be able to bring it back up to a cloud-hosted device. And therefore, that cloud is then trying to analyze that data, put some rules in place, and then give an output to a different user who's going to make a decision. So data is being used for decisions, but it's the user then who is using that data and the criticality of that data. And I think something we've talked about, and something I always go back to, is that the common denominator between the user in IT, the user in OT, an IT OT user, however you want to talk about these users, is integrity of that data. And yes, getting access and where it's stored, it's how can you trust that data? How can you then trust it in transit, also in rest? And and to me, I see now that the common denominator between everyone, and it's used a lot, CIA, AIC, however you want to do it, everybody is all second place is integrity. And we need to obviously know that the integrity is there for data, which then strengthens securing it in transit and securing it at rest.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's more important now than it was. Data's always been important. It's just now there's more uses for it. People are starting to realize, and they need access to it. That's what's important now. And there's now the ability to get access to it. We just have to make sure that as it's moving across these boundaries, it's secure. There's no point just putting 5G on every single, IoT device out there just so you can get monitoring data, because, you're pretty much giving away the keys to your kingdom there.
You need to apply the bit of a, whether it's zero trust or whatever, but the access to the device for the data, can you get it another way? Do you need to provide? So in that instance, go and provide 5G connectivity to every IoT device out there, and then bring all that data out and put it somewhere. So first of all, the data. What is that data? Is it critical? Is it process information? Is it IP? And then obviously think about how you're going to, if you need to access that data, if you don't, restrict it. A bit like you would with users. Setting up a user profile, do you need to start looking at user profiles with regards to data access or data being, accessed out of the environment?
That's great. So I think then, sort of not to jump ahead, but not to go too far forward, I want to just stop there and say, if you're a customer now, you're speaking to customers now, people are listening, where should they start? What should they do? What should the first thing they do if they're listening to this? They want to understand their data in transit. What would you say, Stephen, they should really do?
Well, for me, they need to understand how it's coming in and out. That's one of the questions I asked a few minutes ago. It's like there's probably coming in many different ways. It's easy to think, north-south, south-north. You've got your firewalls, your back-to-back firewalls. You've got your diodes, things like that. But there's other ways it's coming in. There's probably file uploads. There's heaven forbid, I bet you wrote this. And it's funny, you speak to many IT companies out there. We don't use USBs. We even speak to the OT ones. We don't use USBs, but that's because you're speaking to the IT environment. You speak to the OT engineer, they're using it every day. I mean, it's one of the easiest ways to actually transfer files. And, and if you're on an air gap, it's maybe the only way. And it doesn't even have to be USBs. It could be SD cards. It could be any sort of peripherals. It could be floppy disks, CDs. But then you've got other ways that it's coming in. There's secure remote access, the SRAs, the PAMs, jump servers, FTP servers, file uploads, I don't know.
Backup and recovery.
Yeah, there's many different ways these files are coming in. How can you ensure as they're coming in and they're leaving that they're secure? Just because it's the same file that's coming in as what's landed, so your integrity's there, but that could just be the same bad file you've just introduced into your network. Well done. You've kept that secure and it's now working. You've just got to be very careful as they're coming in, and as more data is coming in and leaving, it's got to be good. Because if you look, I mean, just to jump ahead again, because then the question is, well, why are we talking about data? Why are we talking like this? Well, why is security important? I mean, just look at the last few years. Every single one of the big attacks have generally been file-based malware. Even if we were to look at some of the most sophisticated living off the land techniques, I bet if you go back and look at the attack chain, the kill chain, there'll be some sort of file-based delivery mechanism. So how do we stop that? There's more and more files in there now because the attack surface is getting bigger. You've got all of these different IoT devices out there and OT devices out there, and each one of these need these files. You need to get files off them, on them. But how do you ensure that these files are secure and safe? The patches. If we're going to be honest, it's very difficult because the OT devices have to stay up. That's the whole point of it. It's all about availability. So if these OT devices are having to stay up and you're still having to keep them patched, and then you've got the vendors saying you're not allowed to put patches on there, there are resource restrictions and stuff like that. How do you keep your device up to date and secure? How do you create this bubble? And then I'm going to throw something in now that you're going to love. Well, we're talking vendors. So does this mean we've got to start talking supply chain? Where's the supply chain risk? Because if we are talking supply chain, and the whole word chain means you're only as strong as your weakest link, then if we're looking at who they might be targeting, they might not target you specifically because maybe you're doing everything right. Maybe they're going to go for one of the weaker links. And then directly they've got to you by attacking someone weaker. Or maybe indirectly, a script kiddie just happened to get one of your suppliers or your suppliers, and then before you know it, they've got in there without you doing it. And the only reason I'm bringing this up and how it relates back is you look at some of the attacks over the last few years. You've got SolarWinds, you've got Log4j, you've got, I think it was XY utilities in virtually every single Linux distro that pretty much meant you had a backdoor, a rat in there without even knowing. So that's another reason why files are just as important now, because you're bringing patches in. Why should you automatically just say, well, I don't need a zero trust on that patch because that's come from this vendor or that's come from this manufacturer? Well, why are you allowing that?
So a couple of things on that. One of the most recent ones that they gave a bit of a feedback on was the King's College cyber attack in London. That was supply chain. That was a third party, the pathology lab, and obviously how they're transferring data between the two systems. So obviously you've got a third party supplier transferring data back and receiving data from the hospital. And obviously through that, then the hospital has had a ransomware attack, been taken down, and it's not just taking down pathology and test results, she's taken down other parts of the business, other parts of the hospital. So on that one, yeah, the requirement for data was a genuine requirement, because they as a hospital don't do pathology. They bring that in, and that is a business need. But then obviously that business, they have, I can't remember what it's called now. There's a certain requirement within the hospital sector for basically every hospital has to do a check at the start of the year to show that they're ticking a box and going through it. Yeah. And one of those ticking the boxes is obviously that you know all your assets, you know where things are going, but not is it secure into the next level. And I don't believe they look at supply chain yet. DSPT, I think it is. There's the regulation that they use, and every hospital has to go through it every year. So attacks there. But then when you're looking at patching, one of the examples, and that's a file-based transfer that can go either through a network and go through a USB, floppy disk. Everything that everyone is focused at the moment, and obviously it's one of the big pushes, is that all access or all data is being consumed or being used in the most recent applications. So when you start to look at the data, you have to look at the sources and where they're coming from. And this is where we were talking about, and we've talked about many times, and it's a big issue in industry, is you have supported versus unsupported. So now you've got to look at, obviously, a lot of the systems that customers are trying to get access from are probably unsupported systems because they can't keep up to date all the time. Issues on site, but also then turnaround outages, training. It's a very costly approach to keep everything up to date. So actually, if you were to look at it, what's the percentage, would you say, Steve or Alex, of data being accessed from supported versus unsupported? And then how do you look at complementary, what you have to do to secure that data in transit? Because then if you could widen secure data in transit. Actually, the data in transit, you've got to secure the endpoints of where it's connecting from. But I don't know the answer, but it's just a perspective or your opinion. What do you think? Like,
I don't know, mate.
I mean, to me, when I look at the partners that I work with, I would probably say 30 to 40% is at a supported version. And then everything else behind that is at multiple different versions for all different reasons. Because then when you start to go down into those unsupported, it's because they're waiting for the next version because of return on investment. So they don't want to upgrade because they want to get the most bang for their buck out of the next upgrade and the longest period of time. Yeah. They might then not want to upgrade and that system just does what it needs to do, but we do need to access it. Or the asset might have an end of life date and therefore there is no return on investment. But again, bit like you could look at the nuclear sector, lots of things are being decommissioned, but they need to get access to that data out of there and send it across an air-gapped environment to be able to analyze what they need to do, safety, regulations, and so on. So again, you've got different use cases just in two different substreams.
And I mean, going back to the whole patches coming in because they're older, they need these patches constantly coming in. The problem you've got is what do you do there? Many people go, well, I'll just use supply chain risk and look at what goes in there. And yeah, you could be following the NCSE's 12 principles, all that great stuff. You're looking at all of your different contractors, your manufacturers, your vendors, all these different third-party entities that you've got coming in and their supply chain. But the problem you've got is what you're going to do there. You're going to audit them all? And then hopefully that they're following, 27001, they're following SOC 2. But a lot of that stuff is people and process.
Cyber essentials.
Yeah. And if it's people and process, then it could be that day they don't do it. Their people and process might not be as good as you. So what can you do to ensure that you're putting a zero trust around the files or the access, as you've mentioned before, coming in? And I think that's key because you can't rely on your supplier or suppliers to be doing the right thing all the time. Because if someone does happen to get in there, they're not going to say they get in there and they're not going to be probably changing their code. What they'll try and do is probably use a known piece of malware or a known rat and embed that into 10 layers into an executable. You won't even know it's there again. So you've got to almost, as it crosses your boundary, do what you can there.
Wow, that's a lot to take in, I think.
You weren't expecting that, were you?
No, exactly. Yeah.
I think we've just made it a hotter day.
Yeah, exactly. I think you have. Yeah, exactly. So I think there's quite a lot to unpack there for people who are listening. But one thing I just want to ask you, and it kind of links into what current approaches are for people. What do you think people are maybe struggling the most with? Is it moving data into an OT system? Is it taking data out of an OT system? Is it protecting the data within a system? And that then links to sort of the supply chain and what people are doing at the moment. That is so, what are you seeing at the moment and what do you think is
data in and out is easy. Anyone can bring data in and out. I think it's doing it securely.
Yeah.
But I'll let you take this one.
I mean, we were at an event recently for one of my partners and I had two people come up to me and ask me very simply to tell me why diodes are good. And my initial response was because they are. Just to break the ice. And basically what happened was you've got somebody from IT who was currently managing a digitization project and you've got the OT lead. And basically the OT lead had no appreciation and no acceptance of anybody connecting to a system. He didn't accept it. And this is just a little OT manager for an asset. It's like, nobody's connecting to my system. It's air gapped, it's secure, but the business is driving a need to get access. That was a very interesting conversation because you got somebody from IT, somebody from OT, and they were talking about a device that neither one of them knew about. And it was IT didn't know what a diode was. They knew the term diode, but they didn't know what a diode was. And then the OT guy didn't know what a diode was at all. All he knew was, my system is air gapped. Nothing comes into it. Straight away, you could have asked the question, are you sure it's air gapped? Like, how do you apply patches and so on? But at that point, they wanted an answer around diodes and the use case for it. And very simply, what they were looking at is, I want your data. I have what you want, but I don't want to give it you. Because if I give it to you or I have a connection, you're going to make me insecure. And I don't want that risk because it's going to make my life harder. And I think if we look at the people in that as well, when you start to look at solutions like diodes, or you look at file transfers and how you do that, you've got to look at how you're not going to impact and make somebody else's job harder in OT, who has got to go up a learning curve to understand all this, assess the risk, and then see how they're going to manage that going forward, to somebody who's just saying, it's just very simple. You've got a load of things that I want and need to play with. If you just send it across to me, I can then play with it. And it's like, well, it's not that simple, is it? Because I've got to think about the process risk. I've got to think about what you're getting access to and how frequent.
And don't forget, in OT, everyone thinks IT's dirty. You don't want IT getting access. You don't want links in and things like that. But I think for me, one of the hardest things is everyone thinks this layer, this defense in depth. And the biggest depth, the last line of defense, is the endpoint. But in OT, there's not much you can do with the endpoint. You can't just install agents on there because A, you're not allowed, B, the resources are restricted. They could be out of date, things like that. You can't install it. They can only install Windows 7. They can't even patch it. Well, what do you do here? So that's when people start going, well, we've got to put a bubble around this. And that's why everyone started moving to the network now. And that's why you try and harden the network. So first of all, you've got the separation, you've got the firewalls in there. Then people started going, well, let's do segmentation. They start doing VLANs. And then if you're really lucky, I mean, they're doing, anomaly detection, IDS and stuff. But then they start going, well, how do we move from segmentation into micro-segmentation? We start doing it from device to device. Then we start doing IPS and virtual patching. A lot of people aren't even there yet. They want to get there. And that's where you started coming in. It's like, well, in that case, if you're not there and you can't secure it that much, maybe you've just got one tiny little area here you want to secure. It doesn't have to be a network. It could just be a solution. Why not just put a diode in there? I mean, the best thing about a diode is you could actually put that solution on the internet, put a diode in front of it, and know for a fact it can't be hacked. Because even if you manage to get the dirty side of it done, because it's physically impossible to come back, it's physics. There is actually a pin pulled out. You know for a fact that it doesn't matter what happens on the red side, your blue side is secure. And for me, it's when you get over that thinking it's to replace a firewall, it's more to actually just secure a solution. You can still have, because it doesn't do advanced routing and things like that, you still can have your next-gen firewalls or your back-to-back firewalls or your OT firewalls. It's like, how can you create this defense in depth? And this is where we're going with just the network.
But then it's to the point, again, it was one that came up the other day, talking about networking, segmentation, micro-segmentation. Effectively, these devices that have the data only have two NICs. And therefore a active and a standby network that's probably limited to 100 megabits. And it's straight away, that is one of the main reasons why they don't want more data going over their network in case I lose real-time process data dropping, or I then have a network storm or something like that that is created by me, is not an attack, but actually causes an issue for us across our network. To your point then, well, you could just put a diode in and send the information straight from the source out through the diode up to where you need to go. So you don't need to impact it and put it on that existing network. So yeah, in those instances, you can do it. But then what happens if it's not a data stream, it's a file, and they want to send a backup, or they want to send a batch file or a recipe or something like that? And then they're going, well, I'm now sending a file from what we class as trusted, but you class as untrusted into your environment. And that data, again, it's two different, it's the same thing. We're talking about data, but it's two different packages, or hate to use the word payload because obviously it's used for other things, but you know what I mean? It's the parcel that's going, it can be in any form. It can be a continuous connection. It can be temporary. It can be done through polling data and that kind of thing. It's like, as you start to get that and you send it across, this is then when I go back to the integrity bit, and it's making sure that it's going.
And I think you touched on 2 use cases there. I'm sorry we're jumping into use cases now, but I think one of them would be...
He's not sorry.
He's not. No.
Sorry, not
Absolutely
sorry.
not.
Sorry, not sorry. You cut that later, I don't know. But you've got, for instance, now you've got all these IoT devices that are quite often bypassing your network, your let's say Purdue model, if people are still going down that whole thing, and they're going direct to cloud because they need MQTT data or real-time monitoring. And they're like, well, hang on a minute, this is going straight to my Azure, my GCP and things like that, or whatever's in the cloud. And you're like, well, hang on a minute. What, they've got 5G on there. How am I keeping control of this? Well, simple. Just put a tiny little diode in front of it. It doesn't matter. Then at least then you know for a fact your monitoring data is going out, but nothing's coming back in. You've still kept this boundary, this almost like pseudo air gap is still there, and it allows you. The other one that I think is quite a nice one is I've seen recently there's a big sprawl over when you're getting all these different OT vendors coming in with their own little, not black boxes, but their own solutions. And they put them in, and there are pockets of them everywhere, especially in the bigger OT industries. And they're like, well, now we put them in there, but we need to get that file off there, or these files off there regularly. They might be small, they could be backup monitoring, it could be anything. And you're like, and then suddenly you got the bigger, wider enterprise going, well, no, you can't just put it on our network. We're going to need a jump server. You're like, what, you're going to jump server to remote control in? No, just to copy the files off. So they've now put a Windows server in there. It's got to have group policies on there. It's got to be patched. It's got to be part of AD. It's got to have ADR on there. It's got all this on there. And they've got pockets of these everywhere just to copy a file from A to B into their network securely. You think, why didn't you just put a small diode in there? Because that's the job of a diode. It's not like a firewall that just is, you shall not pass. It actually has software on there that copies from A to B securely, SMB to SFTP or SFTP to SFTP, and it just does it simple. But you know it's set and forget, and it's about as secure as you can come. I know I said I wasn't going to go on too much, but a couple of use cases just to think about.
Yeah, exactly, Steve. You don't talk too much, do you, at all? So
No, he doesn't.
yeah. But one thing I would say is,
we're cutting that bit out as well, right?
No. Anything that's any of use to you, it's all staying in. So one thing, like, I could definitely say I'm seeing that sort of difficulty or that sort of like meeting point between like the IT and maybe the business needs and the OT. And I think you've put it really well there. You said, OT's got the data. Yeah, exactly.
It's because you talk too much.
I don't know what he's after.
But you said, OT's got the information and essentially business wants it and they don't always get on. And I think, I think that's a big problem that with the data.
That was the perfect example. Got a customer coming up who got somebody from IT who's, I think, they were the project manager for the project. And obviously they were at this event and it was all about understanding what's going on and what they're trying to do in this area, but with a focus on cybersecurity to get access to that data. And that was a customer, an end customer. But then you think about it with partners for me, and I look after the industrial control vendors, they're all trying to enable cloud and get access. But they don't have the data. So again, they are now like another external, they're IT, they're IT, but they know OT and they understand OT because your system is our system, basically, at the end of the day. But for us to be able to give you predictive monitoring, for us to be able to give you proactive capabilities, we need access to your data to be able to look at it and to build these analytics platforms and to be able, and then straight away again, you've now got, like you said, you've got OT and IT saying that we're not giving you a connection, and then they're coming in going, well, we can just get the data. We'll put a 5G device on it and we'll get a stream out. So again, I know it's saying it's very data rich and it has been and it always will be, because that is effectively where everything is kept, process information, batch, everything. Everybody wants access to it. And again, I think that now is why when you go back to things like NCSC or you go back to regulation, that I think they need to be a bit more prescriptive with regards to data in transit, because it's open for interpretation and it's okay. Well, if you look at data in transit, I've got 3 different use cases. I've got an internal use case, I've got another internal use case, and then I've got an external supply chain use case to work with them on a beta for a solution I want that they haven't even developed or released to market yet, but they need access. And because I'm critical infrastructure, I now need to put a lot of things in place. Well, actually, no. I think we've already said that multiple times. You don't. You can do simple things like put a diode in and send that data to them.
And I think it's nice you're coming back to data, because we've just discussed that, you know, the endpoint's hard to control really in OT. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all want to have a great goalkeeper. We want Peter Shilton in his heyday there as your last thing, but you don't want that to all your eggs to be there, do you? You want to have a good team in front of it. But you want and then we've just started talking briefly around the network. But one thing that we're starting to go to now is, well, what about the data itself? You know, you can harden the network, you can try and harden the device, although people aren't doing that as often. I remember the days of critical system protection and data center security and all that. But now it's and they're trying to do the network. It's not as easy. So it's like, well, what can we do to start hardening the data? How can we ensure that's data clean? Because even if you're doing things like anomaly detection on the network, yeah, this device is now talking to this device. This is doing this. And yeah, if it's lower level, then you can start looking at registries and parameters and stuff like that. But if it's a slightly higher level, then you really need to start looking at the content of a file to ensure it's clean. And if you're not looking at the content and all you're doing is paying it lip service, then what's the point? You might as well just let everything in and become the Wild West. And what I mean by that, again, you could almost go back to the supply chain. As patches are coming in or files are coming in, then unless you're unpacking them properly, what's the point? I was given a 300 meg installer. It was a setup.exe the other day. And that setup.exe, it was 300 meg. If you looked at it at the face value, you'd think, that's all right. It's signed, blah, blah, blah. Great. Let it straight in. When you started unpacking it, there was something like 80,000 files within it. There was CAB files and MSIs within MSIs, MSUs within MSIs. And it carried on going. And most anti-malware vendors and stuff may only do 7 deep or may only do 6 deep. So if I was, let's say, got into someone's supply chain, was able to somehow get into their packing system, I just put my RAT 9 level deep. Maybe I'd even rename it or change it slightly. So unless you're actually doing something properly, then you're going to get in there. You might just allow it in. It's like, well, you've got to make sure that every file you're unpacking, you're extracting, you're analyzing, you're looking not just to see, is there malware on each one of them, but you're also seeing, is there vulnerabilities on each one? Because they may not be malicious, but they may be exploitable still. You need to know about this sort of stuff, because it could be that these rats aren't zero-day rats. They're well-known ones. They've just been embedded in a zero-day, let's say, delivery mechanism, a delivery archive, a zip file, a CAB file, a setup.exe, or something like that. And that's where you've got now not just defense in depth, but you need a layered approach there. And I'm sure, and I'll let you talk in a minute, what about... Well, we'll do. What am I thinking? One thing we're seeing in the industry now, especially when we're talking about the content, is multi-scanning, multiple AVs, because anti-malware is for known threats. But the thing about it is not everybody knows about them. So it's all good saying, well, it's all right, everything's working for us. We've got our one AV, brilliant. It's like, well, how do you know it's working? In this case, no news is definitely not good news. And if you start looking at all of these vendors, you start throwing them through, then you start realizing that the more AVs you've got, the closer you get to a better efficacy. Yeah. That's the bottom line.
One of my partners has just implemented that as a internal policy. For any software deliverable to a customer, it has to go through a minimum of 3 AVs scanning and signed before they send it out. So you can already see that vendors are starting to look at how they transfer strategic files across to their customers, and they're doing greater than 3 or a minimum of 3 AV scanning of anything that is going out from them out to their customers. And
it's all good saying defense in depth. Well, I've got one at the this border, I've got one at this border, different one at this border, I've got one on the endpoint. Again, you're then waiting. What happens if it gets all the way to the endpoint? You don't. You want to be catching it. So you want your greatest strength at the borders as it's crossing your boundaries. You really do want it. Whether it's how it's crossing, it doesn't matter if it's a USB, if it's because that's still an ingress point, isn't it? That's a conduit. You're just walking. Or whether it's a file upload, you still want to make sure that you're doing this multiple scanning there.
Well, I saw the other day, I was looking at some firewall solutions out on the market, and a lot of them had micro SD cards as the onboard memory or the onboard configuration, like the fallback. Again, it's like, how are people looking at, like, all they're thinking about is the actual firewall, configuring that firewall, and then making sure that that is secure for its purpose. And I think in that point, that's when they then forget, oh, right, that was
bring
the
this SD card.
Yeah,
that was the USB in. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, that was the like the data in transit piece. But actually, the securing the data in transit piece is not just what's going through it, but also securing the device itself. Like you said, it's the device, it's what's on the device, it's what's going through the device, but also how the device is then delivered and how it's managed.
Yeah, and it's not just about AV. I mean, I've just mentioned anti-malware there, multiple AVs. They're great for known threats. And even if we're going to be honest, some unknown threats, because many use AI and they can do heuristics and malware families, they can capture some 0 days. But if you really want to start targeting more of the targeted attacks, the polymorphics and the 0 days, that's when you've got to start really running files and looking at sandboxes as well, which a lot of people do. But generally in OT, if they are doing it, they're sending it to an IT SOC and then the SOC explodes it after the fact. Well, that's too late because the horse is bolted. You've got patient 0. If this is a worm, that could have already riddled your OT. You really need to be doing this in line. Mm-hmm. And it's not just for executables, because quite a lot of the stuff's hidden within Office files,
yep.
Excel, Word, and things like that. And if you actually break one of them open, they're no longer glorified text files. If you look at a Word document now, it's like got embedded fonts within there. You could JPEGs within JPEGs. You could have stenography within there, executables, callbacks. If you're not analyzing a true one and all you're relying on is some laptop you've got in a cupboard that you occasionally bring out that you're hoping's got an AV on that's up to date and you're not reporting on to scan a USB or an SD card or whatever, then is that good enough?
You mean the engineering laptop that is in probably every site possible?
Yeah.
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 And then the one thing we haven't talked about.
Another use case there.
What about, again, we're going back to supply chain, but what about the contractors that are coming on site with their laptops? They've got a piece of software on this laptop that, it's only installed on this laptop. It can't be put on anything else, can't put on a USB. I need this laptop. Well, what do you do then? How do you ensure that laptop is scanned? Yeah. They're not going to let you put an agent on there. So unless you've got something dissolvable or you're able to scan that laptop, what are you going to do?
That laptop that's also probably out of date, unsupported, not been patched, and then has the key on it.
Yeah.
That key is the key that can only be used for those devices to configure them or to make changes to them, and has to be physically connected to them.
Member of the Tor network, what's the worst that can happen to it? It's you look at it and you go, really?
I think there's so much to unpack there, and I think where we've come from in saying, what data is. We've spoken a bit about data in transit, and a lot of the time you guys have mentioned, people have got air gap systems, and then Ben, I think you mentioned, he says it's air gaps, but how do you get firmware updates into the system? Mm-hmm. And so it's not just about having that conversation about getting data out information. It's actually what are you already doing, and you're saying it's air gapped, and maybe it's actually not, and because you're moving data into and out of it. So I think sort of build on that. We've spoken a lot about moving that data in terms of maybe using patches, everything like that. Or you can do multi-layer scanning is what you've been speaking about. Where do you think maybe...
Could be data coming out as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we've not mentioned... nowadays, people think when you say DLP, they immediately go GDPR. And they're like, but we don't have much in the way of passport information in OT. But it's like, well... DLP is not just that either. It could be secrets, passwords. Yeah. It could be, there's buzzwords you're looking for, like a certain gas that people could be leaking, not on purpose, but you have to look for. So DLP is also very important in OT, and it's becoming a lot more, we're getting asked a lot more about it. In the olden days, no one even cared about it. It was an IT thing. Now people are like, hang on a minute, I could be leaking stuff that I'm doing by accident.
You could look at the water industry, and you could look at the remote effluent process. At the end, what's the word I'm looking for? At the exit of the wastewater works. Obviously, that data, it's a device. They might not have been able to physically connect it, back onto the site. So they then put it on a wireless network. That wireless network isn't secure. The data is being passed through it back to a receiver in the the wastewater works. And your environmental people are sat around there and piggyback off on it, getting that data, extracting it, and then are able to come back to the water company and go, you said you didn't have any spillage events. Well, what we can see, how do you then know that data they've taken actually is true and is factual and they haven't manipulated it? And then how can the water company actually say, well, we can honour that data that we've got in our system that's passing around is actually secure, and therefore it won't have changed from source to source.
Yeah. And
so you've got different use cases and different ways of how data is becoming. I think something I was thinking about then when you were talking about it with access, we're sending a lot of data out and there's a lot of data going in, data coming in and a lot of data going around in the network. When you're sending data out, and it's a conversation I had with a customer a while back, NTSC and the regulations fall on obviously critical national infrastructure, and that 9 times out of 10 falls onto those in the OT estate. They're not very confident in putting forward to those who are wanting to make requests of getting that access to data, putting the restrictions on them and actually highlighting to them what they need to do. And I think this is the bit where it would really help probably the audience, is to understand like simple steps of how they could be able to say what you need to do, supply chain, or passing not the risk but the requirements onto the person asking for it, and then understanding, like you say, put a diode in. Okay, well, if you're going to put a diode in, I will put the diode in, I will send the information to you, and any request you need for further information, you have to come back to us, not go around and make changes or connect it to a network. We have to understand how that data is going to be transited for that use case.
As files were coming in and out, and it's an air-gapped system, what can they do to make it a little bit easier, right? And if you look at many of the governments, they've been doing this for years. You know, that's why you've got your cross domains. That's why you've got your impexes and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, they're going for sheep dip, which is great. Come in, walk in with a disk, scan it, walk it on. You know, you've got your pretty much your sneaker net. But it's like, well, what can you do day one, day two? Because when it comes to OTs, or you want to start now being operationally efficient, you need to doing a lot more integration. Just making life easier and taking away a lot of the human risk as well. And it's like, well, how can we now start moving these files to the network, and then on the network being scanned, so they're constantly being scanned, then going across the borders, maybe doing a different type of scan once it's in the high network. All of this is possible today. It's just a matter of people talking and thinking, well, what do we want to do? What kind of scanning do we want to do in the low network? What kind of scanning do we want to do in the high network? Is it the same scanning? Is it different scanning? How can we get automated access to these files? So you can take away this human risk, because once someone's scanned a file, what's to stop them changing it? What's to stop them modifying it? What's to stop them losing it? Or anything like that. If that's been put on the network and suddenly now you've got release control, you've got supervisor approval, it's constantly getting rescanned. So you've got quarantine and stuff like that happening, because it's a 0 day, it's an unknown threat now, maybe it's a known threat in an hour's time. How can you ensure of that? And then how can you build that out so that other people use it? Maybe your secure remote access ties into this. Maybe your third parties are uploading files from the internet ages ago as part of an MFT, all link into this. But it doesn't matter. As it's crossing these boundaries, you're being scanned by this layered technology. So you're ensuring it's got a sandbox, it's got multiple AVs, it's getting unpacked. That's where I think we need to start thinking. How do we get away from these siloed? This is just how we've always done it. It's like, well, yeah, but is there a better way? Is there a more automated way? Can we involve SOARs? Can we just do it via integrations? And I think that's where I'm seeing a lot more people talking to me now saying, look, we've got to get over these skill gaps. Well, is there anything we can do to start automating some of this? So still keeping the security or even getting more security, but at the same time, being able to do more with less.
How did you not get AI in there as well?
I know. This is what I do, mate. It's a talent.
I mean, we've been talking about the subject for 45 minutes now. I mean, there's a lot for the audience, and I'd probably segue into the bit that you really want to talk about. Is we've talked about a lot about now what's happening, what we're seeing in examples, regulation. I mean, wouldn't you want to know advice? Like, what is the next step, or like how to give like a quick tip for a customer or something like that? Is that what you'd want?
No, not at all. No, of course, yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to sort of wrap it up now. Sort of like maybe a last sort of comment, last bit of advice that you could give to people who are listening to this around data in transit and securing that data. So Ben, maybe start with yourself.
Yeah, diodes, they're great. Said it earlier, I'll say it again. Diode. No. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the one tip for, especially in the OT, prioritize. Any request for your data, prioritize it against the business need and the risk, and then look at how they weigh each other up. Is it a greater risk and financial impact for you to be able to provide that data, but provide it securely? And what is going to be the cost of providing that and the business benefit that's going to come out of it, because the business has to pay for it. You're not going to take it out of your budget. You're going to go back to the business and say, to enable this business transformation, this is what you need to do to be secure now to get that data. That's what I would say, is put the onus back on the requester to say, happy to give it you, but to give it you need to put a diode in. You'll need to get this or be given this data, and then it's yours. But I am not giving you access into my environment for you to go and play or to transfer things. Assess what the request is and assess the best secure route to provide access.
Yeah, and Steve, what was your quick
I
tip?
don't know what was the question again?
What's your sort of like, yeah.
I don't know. For
Summarise
me,
all this.
so I don't go over anything you've just said. For me, it would be almost like as data's coming in, how do you know you're secure? Prove it. It's very easy to say, well, we scan it with a laptop out of the cupboard. Okay, well, prove it. What are you actually doing? What is that laptop doing to it? If it's just doing an AV, is that really good enough? You just got to ask yourself. Yeah. It's not about, meeting regulation, tick boxes and stuff like that. When it comes to OT, this could be people's lives if it gets hacked. There's some real serious repercussions. Do you want really good enough tick boxes, or do you want to be doing it properly? That's what I'd say.
That brings us to an end of this episode of Capula's The Ultimate Exchange, and that was based on data in transit. Thank you to our guests from OPSWAT, Steven Broadwell and Ben White. If you want to find out more information, news and resources, please visit www.capula.com. There you can also get in contact with us or connect with us on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.